are our greatest ambassadors, being number 17 out of 200. It's actually, it's not a mean feat, and we applaud. Just as the Cabinet Secretary has mentioned, there's need to improve the facilities that these athletes are training in. We need to look at their welfare as athletes in terms of insurance. What best can we do to improve their well-being as athletes? More so, also in terms of them representing the country abroad. When they come back in terms of award, can we improve them? Can we improve the awards and such like? So there's a lot more that we can do as a country. Yes.
And of course, I mean, they don't do it for the prizes. They would do it for the honor of the nation and for the people of the Republic. And that's why we need to congratulate them and, of course, honor them for bringing so much glory to nations. Of course, Team Kenya. And we also need to invest more in facilities, you know, so that they can, our athletes, our sportsmen and women can get an opportunity to train in some of the best facilities in the world. Well, it's now coming to 11:02. We're getting into the second hour of Biz Check. My name is O'Brien Kimani. We're taking a short break. Thereafter, we'll be back with the conversation of the day, and we are looking at the state of Kenya oil and gas industry, as well as what's happening the world over. Stay right here. We'll be back after the break.
Niaje mam, umeupdate token meter yetu?
Ai? Hiyo ni nini?
Acha nikuchanue yako. So, kuna hii text. Kwa hiyo text kuna code reset token meter. Ili kuupdate token meter.
On KBC Channel 1, we are a TV station like no other. In entertainment.
Yes, indeed.
Feel the passion.
Will you promise me?
I swear that you will never lose me. I can't get married to you.
I'm sure you knew about it. That's me.
Experience the drama.
Get out.
Who is the man in this one?
And the laughter.
Hii wigi umevaa kichwani.
Sile wakati tulikuwa tunaapishwa tunapewa.
Move to the beat.
From Broadcasting House.
And get informed on the latest happenings. KBC Channel 1.
Wow. Wow. Yeah!
We are the full package.
Oh, yes.
And Kenya's watching.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Are you a talent? Are you passionate about a topic you want to discuss? But for an upcoming artist. Don't worry, Studio Mashinani has got your back. Sign up on ajira.co.ke to book a session with your music and video producers across the country. Work on your music, jingles, spoken words, and even podcasts to realize your dream, all for free. Radani Talent.
Back in time, and the year was 2012 when Kiraito Murungi, a professor, was the Minister for Energy. And he made a major announcement that Kenya had secured huge deposit of oil in the Turkana Basin. And was known as Gamia 1. How many years later? More than 12 years later. What is the state of Kenya's oil and gas industry? Have we managed to reap big in our quest to become a major exporter of oil? That is the kind of conversation that we are going to have here. We're live from our national headquarters here in Nairobi. My name is O'Brien Kimani, and you're watching Biz Check. We're joined by Muturi Kamau. He's the Kenya Oil and Gas Working Group Coordinator. He's been here before, and he's joining us this morning to help us more with very much, Muturi.
Thank you.
Kibare, she's an environmental law and policy advocate here in Kenya. Kibare, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
I want, first of all, want to hear from Muturi. You know, there was a lot of hoopla and hula baloo, you know, in 2012 when Kenya finally announced to the world that we have discovered a huge deposit of hydrocarbons in Gamia 1, Turkana County. And finally, people said, hallelujah, we are about to make it big. 12 years down the line, have we managed to make it big?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here again to dissect the state of our upstream petroleum sector. And answer you, I'd like to also take you back to where it all started. According to the information that is public from the National Oil Corporation of Kenya website, began in around the 1950s, thereabout.
In Lamu Basin?
Yes, in Lamu Basin. And then we saw a lot of activity happen in the tertiary rift basin, which is within the Rift Valley, specifically up north, where Shell drilled LEA-1, which was followed by Loperot-1, thereabout, I think, in 1993. Other players came in different parts of the country. Some were in Wandera, some were in Anza, up until the big players, Talo Oil, came into the geographical landscape. And so after that, it is all pomp, glory and celebration that we have hit commercial quantities of crude oil. Now, we were still very nascent in the sector. We were still relying on the Petroleum Exploration and Development Act, Cap 308 of 1986. So we were still behind, for lack of a better term. The period of 2012 to 2020 came all the activities with regards to streamlining our governance frameworks. We saw the enactment of the Petroleum Act 2019. We saw the development of the local content 16, and so on and so forth. A lot of policy reforms around the environmental as well as the petroleum sector was seen at that time. But most notably came the early oil pilot scheme, where we saw the former president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, flag off a consignment of commercial transported via trucks from Turkana to Changamwe via road. And I think it was a year later, 2019, we saw the flagging off of 240,000 barrels of crude oil from the port of Mombasa for export to. Now, according to Talo and the ministry at the time, the reason why early oil was important to them was, one, to ensure that the infrastructure was improved. For those who've had a chance to now visit Turkana, the roads are in a spectacular condition. There's tarmac everywhere that you can actually access, which is actually good. But more specifically, it was to support access to the oil basin. The second thing was to get more data, the reservoir data. Three, to determine our crude would compete in the international market. This is against Brent. And so come last year, when Senator Lomenen, through the Senate Standing Committee on Energy,
And is a senator for Turkana.
For Turkana, yes.
Yeah.
They were, I mean, through a letter to the then cabinet secretary for Energy and Petroleum, Davis Check, who was requested to appear before the committee to answer two questions. One, where did the monies from the EOPS and the Turkana community, the natives from Turkana, were able to expect revenues from or to benefit from the revenues accrued. And in his statement, he categorically expressed the fact that the capital expenditure for the Ali oil was approximately 50. And the profits from Ali oil were estimated to be around $27 million. So essentially, we ended up having a project that ran for almost 2.5 years that made a loss of about $27 million. Again, the government. The Ali oil was not part of the was not a profit making initiative, and
it was actually a pilot project.
It was actually a pilot project, but people, some stakeholders from different quarters have come to argue out that it wasn't really necessary. But again, it put Kenya on the map as one of the very first countries in East Africa to actually put its crude oil out in the market.
We are the first.
We are the first.
Because Uganda is yet to do so.
Uganda is actually in the process of setting up the East Africa crude oil pipeline that will run from Hoima all the way to Tanga. It is actually considered the longest heated crude oil pipeline with an estimated length of about 1,300 kilometers. The proposed one that is supposed to run from Turkana to Lamu is estimated to be about 800. But it is all part of the field development plan, because as of December 2021, Talo, the field development plan, a technical document to the ministry consideration, provisions of the field supposed to be presented together with the production share Parliament for ratification. But unfortunately, as of last week, there were media reports that the ministry had sent back the development plan back to Talo for comments. So as it is, largely that is where we are. If to support the oil and gas sector in Turkana, considerable things that has been happening is community land registration. As we proceed, so that from Wakili and the different policy sector.
Yeah, Kibare, help us understand this. I mean, why does it take too long? You know, and Muturi has said it well. I mean, Kenya has been in this business of exploring for oil since the 1950s. We discovered commercially viable oil back in 2012. We shipped the first consignment prior basis in 2021. When you look at all those milestones, I mean, it has taken quite a long time. Why is it such a long and tedious process? Or are we doing it?
I wouldn't say we are doing it the wrong way, first and foremost. We are actually doing it the right way. The only contention will be, were we prepared for this project from the beginning? When I talk about preparation, there is issues to do in terms of legislation. What was the legislation in place at the time enough to cater for the eventualities that were going to come by? In terms of policy formulation and in terms of development as a county, was it ready? And then it goes back to the people themselves. Mining, extraction of oil being such a new phenomenon to them, there was need to, one, balance expectations, because at the moment they announced there is oil in Turkana, everyone was happy that money is coming. And a lot of migration, urban to urban, urban to rural migration, with the expectations that there was a lot of money that this project was going to to bring. So you'll find that when it comes to the workforce and the people project came, there was a lot of expectations which were not managed per se. So you'll find that in the process of exploration all the way the three-stage process, you might find that there were instances where resistance would of course arise in terms of when they to the ground and people expect that there'll be jobs. You see, there'll be knowledge transfer, there'll be a lot of sharing of benefits from these companies. So when they expect this to happen immediately, but you see their extraction of oil is a long time. That the life of a mine can take even up to 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. But this is not information that was really put adequate training and advocacy on the ground for our people. So there was the view that the people started believing that this project was actually maybe benefiting a few, or it did not have any benefit at all. And in essence, they now started concentrating on the negative aspects of the project in its end. So I'll say that yes, we started this process. We are actually trying to do it the right way, because you'll find that there are gaps in terms of legislation and policy in order to ensure maximum benefit from these resources. It takes time, but also in terms of legislation, I think we should be able to speed up some of the processes. Not only the country at large, but even the local community.
When President Uhuru Kenyatta, former, was flagging off the tracks from Lokicha Basin to Changamwe holding point in Mombasa, he said that this was some sort of a trial and error kind of a program. We were supposed to learn whether, number one, this venture is workable, and number two, the areas that we need to improve on in terms of logistics and infrastructure. And when the report came, Talo Oil said that they have learned a number of lessons that are going to be implemented to help in the seamless flow of oil from Kenya. And they reported that Kenya became the first country in East Africa to secure some money, because I think we got about 1.5 billion shillings from these exports. And so 2018, 2020, and now we're in 2024. We haven't shipped out any other consignment of oil. What is happening now?
Thank you. So essentially, to understand how the upstream, you need to appreciate the fact that when you hear about all these big players, what they bring is the financial muscle.
And the expertise.
But largely, of course, the expertise comes from the service industries that actually feed into... for instance, if you are to look at a single project from exploration to development, costs alone that would go into survey to exploratory drilling would estimate a company to about 30 to 40 million. That is a considerable amount of money. Looking at the reservoirs within the South Lokicha Basin, it is estimated that the Turkana alone has an estimated 2.9 billion barrels. But again, what Talo has mentioned that they are able to recover is estimated to be about 580 million barrels. But again, there's a lot of revenue that has been coming in that does not necessarily require us to wait until production. For instance, for companies that have undertaken exploration, a lot of them have to do or give what we call signature bonuses. agreements that we've been able to see, they vary depending on the agreement that has been there between the host government and the company itself. That can go up to millions. You have surface rents that need to be paid to government. You have, right now as we are transitioning to development, there's development bonuses that, of course, already paid to government. So I think in terms of looking at the revenue streams, there has been monies that have been coming in pre the early oil pilot scheme. Where, well, you know, we are trying to understand where we are in the global space. It is also important to understand some of the factors that are probably influencing in one way why we are where we are. For instance, the world right now is actually there's a lot of conversation around energy transition, and that of course is also putting a pressure on oil and gas companies. We can actually move away from fossils. That is a lot of pressure that is coming from non-state actors, and of course, seeing how that play out is also going. Is really defining the petroleum sector as is. But just to also add to the shifting dynamic in Kenya as it is right now, it is interesting that you'll never get crude oil being discovered in areas like Nairobi or Kiambu. Most of the times it is in very remote places, very marginalized places. And of course the tenure system there is community land. So since 2016 to 2024, we are seeing different parts of communities in different parts of the country trying to fast track the community land registration process. For example, last year, the National Land Commission gazetted public participation exercise to with regards to compulsory acquisition of land for the Lapset corridor project, and that sort of ignited the haste by communities in Turkana to actually fast track community land registration. And as it is right now, I think it was yesterday when I think 6 or 7 communities actually got their registration certificates. And that essentially means that they are one step closer to getting titles for their land, which essentially means that communities will now have an opportunity to negotiate directly with investors. So it really brings a very interesting shift for how we view and interpret the oil and gas space. Just recently, I think it was in June, when communities came out to hold the county government to account, the Turkana county government to account on estimated 258 million that was paid by Talo as part of land lease fees. And it's simply because now communities are well aware and they have the backing of the Community Land Act. As it is, the Community Land Act stipulates under Section 5 that county governments hold, land in trust for communities. But it also mentions that the once communities have registered their land, the counties shall seize, register and manage that land on behalf of communities. It's going to go back to counties, and it is going to be interesting to see how when Talo comes back, because the big issue right now, as it is that they are looking for a strategic investor to advance development and production. So it is going to be very interesting to see as they expand into more and more community lands, how communities will be able to sit down with the investor on the table. There's an interesting saying that if you're not on the table, then you're definitely the meal. So they are moving from being under the table to being part of the decision making on the table.
I want to hear this from Kibare. When you talk to officials from Talo Oil, they'll tell you that yes, the Kenya Oil project is a viable project. It can rake in billions to the Kenyan's economy, but our rate of moving proposals, policies, and even recommendations, from point A to point B, especially in the public sector, is too slow. do you agree with them? And then number two, then what do we need to do to expedite? I know government all over the world, they thrive on bureaucracies. But what can we do to improve on our bureaucracies and to hasten such processes?
Okay. Yeah, I will definitely agree that, especially in terms of legislation, it is a bit slow. You'll find that since this process began in 1950s, it is only in 2016 that we came up with the Community Land Act. This was essential because you realize, just as Muturia said, that most of these projects are found in areas that land is held by the community. So we had to come up with the Community Land Act in 2016. It took again another 1 year to come up with the community land regulations. Now the regulations are what informs the process of which these communities can now register their lands. Then you'll find that also all the way back in 2016, we had the local content bill, which up to now I think it's still a bill, that it hasn't yet been passed. And this is a very crucial bill that will inform maximum benefit of the communities in terms of these natural resources. You'll find that under the Petroleum Act, they'll mention issues to do with local content. Local content being the ways in which communities are at the center and they benefit maximally from resources, be it in terms of social services, be it in terms of employment, in terms of knowledge transfer and all that. You'll find that this is still a bill. It has not yet been enacted into law. Yeah. And under the Petroleum Act, it is just mentioned in brief. But if you look at the bill itself, it grows broader to stipulate ways in which even local content itself will benefit the community. It also goes ahead to provide issues to do with local content audit, which when an investor comes to the ground, it does not matter just the fact that you've given jobs to 1,000 people and there is no any other regulation that ensures that you are held to account to ensure that these jobs keep increasing and keeps getting better, and locals do not only get the manual jobs, they are actually, there's also knowledge transfer to ensure that they can actually rise the ranks and be able eventually to not rely on international investors, but in the future that Kenyans can actually be able to do this on their own. So in terms of legislation and policy, yes, we say we've slowed down. And an example maybe in Turkana, I think it's right now it's when they are coming up with the policy on extractives, which is a welcome step. But also this activity having been there for quite some time, this obviously needed to be one of the priority areas. And also in terms of community land registration, since 2016 when it was enacted as an act, it is up to, I think, recently that as Muturia said, only 3 communities are able now, they are closer to getting a title to their land from 2016. So those
are almost 8 years.
Yes. So the process has actually been a bit slower, and we understand in terms of legislation and policy making and the bureaucracy in the middle, and also the issues to do with the national roles of national government and county governments, the devolution and division of roles. I think there's need to speed up these processes for the community to be prepared to maximally benefit from the resources, because these resources are finite resources. They at the very end they'll not be there forever. Yes, they'll diminish.
Look, for example, when you look at the Petroleum Act, which is considered to be a major breakthrough in our exploration processes. I mean, it took more than 6 years, to debate before it finally became into an act. And in the meanwhile, technology is changing. The global policy and the global environment policies are also changing. The industry itself is also changing, within that span of 6 years. And so you discover that what was in fashion 6 years ago may not necessarily be in fashion today. And so, you know, as a lawyer and with a legal background, where do we always get it wrong when it comes to passing critical legislations that are aimed at even, you know, opening up this country economically?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It has taken a bit of time to pass these legislations. There are a lot of issues in between. Of course, there being a very profitable sector, you cannot shy away or run away from the fact that there'll be interests. People will interest in terms of interest in land, because it touches on issues to do with land, and also and land being an emotive issue in Kenya, we understand the intricacies that come with it.
It's all over the world, actually.
Yeah, all over the world. You understand the intricacies that comes with that. And then also in terms of power shift, because if you look at this process started, all community land was held by the county governments in trust for those communities. But then we are coming up with an act that is the Community Land Act and the Community Land Regulations that says, in fact, these communities can actually hold this land for themselves and be able to negotiate with investors on their own. So there will be that power shift from the county government having the power over this community land and being able to receive money in terms of leases to these international companies, oil exploration companies. And now the community will have the power, because once community land has been registered, it means the power shifts. The county government no longer, it shifts to the community through the community land management committees, and these committees are able to negotiate on their own, receive money, and decide on themselves on how they are going to use this money.
And I agree the fact. Sorry for stepping on your shoes. I'll allow you to conclude. And bringing in a lot of heat, because yes, you may argue that you know, the land in Turkana belongs to the communities in Turkana, but Turkana is in Kenya. And Kenya is the big picture here. Turkana is just a small picture. And so if then you give this land, the ownership of this land, to the community Turkana to negotiate, to agree with investors, and to do whatever it takes, you know, in regard to that land, then where do you leave Kenya, which is now the bigger picture, which is supposed to be the guiding principle in our conversation? And bearing in mind that some of these big companies, they have wide experience when it comes to negotiation. Communities, they do not have serious exposure to international obligations, international agreements, international negotiations. So you may end up with the short end of the stick. So how do we safeguard against this?
Okay. First of all, the Constitution stipulates that natural resources belong to the people of Kenya. So even if a natural resource is in my backyard, I remember it belongs to everyone. And that's why there's the provision of law that where there is a natural likelihood of compulsory acquisition by the state of that parcel of land for the benefit of everyone. Now, the law also stipulates that there is share in terms of what we get from the revenues we get from these natural resources. There is a percentage, which is I think 75% that goes to the national government. There is the one for county government, and then there's 25, and then the one that goes to the community. For the Community Land Act, this 5% will go to the county government, and the county government was actually required to open a special interest earning account to hold that money for the community. But now we are saying, since communities are registering themselves, this share of the community can actually be held by the community itself. But now in terms of 75% going to the national government and the percentage going to the county government, 25, then it means that these earnings or benefits of natural resources will in the of Kenya. Only that what the community is concentrating on is the share that is entitled to them as a community. Because of course you understand, and being on the ground with the people in these areas, in extractive areas, there's a lot of mistrust between the people, the community, and the county government. They do not trust their money being the county is actually even safe. And that's why they are really working hard to ensure that they register their land, they be able to come up with a committee, open a bank account, get their 5%, and look for appropriate initiatives that benefit them and be able to invest that money for themselves and their generations.
You see, you are talking in communities and their leaders, and also there is a lot of mistrust between the national government and devolved units in the name of counties. And so, Muturi, you know, the Kenya Oil and Gas Sector Working Group, I mean, you've been here since 2006?
2009.
2009, yes. Interacted with communities in these resource-rich counties. From your experience, how can we heal this mistrust between communities and in form of county government as well as national government?
Yes, thank you. I think this I'll probably relate this to what Wakili has mentioned. There are ties to these different forms of agreements that are entered into. At the national level, before an investor does anything on the ground, they have to get into an agreement called the production sharing contract. That stipulates so many things, including what is to be paid, how it's going to be paid, the percentages, there is mathematics and so forth. There's a lot that goes into that particular document. But what is happening right now, looking at issues to do, for instance, with land leases, agreements that as per the Community Land Act, communities need to be informed about what is happening on their land, as well as there's some of these documents with regards to environmental and social impacts of such projects on their land. They need to be very well aware. Now, if you're looking at the recent development in Turkana with the 258 million, the simpler thing to do, because it has generated a lot of discussion at the county and at the and communities are there saying that they want a fair share of that money to go to them. I remember this one lady at one time when I was in Turkana, she told me that this oil from EOPS would have just been put in the governor's vehicle. He drives back to Turkana, and then we celebrate and say that this is crude oil from Turkana. But you see, in essence, it all depends of these communities. The simplest thing to do is to start by ensuring that there is transparency of agreements, there's transparency of engagements, there's transparency when it comes to what agreements have been entered into and by whom. Now, just to broaden the picture a bit, if you're looking at countries such as Uganda and Tanzania have already signed into the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. We are yet to do that. However, as per Section 119 of the Petroleum Act, it mandates that the Cabinet Secretary should develop a framework for transparency and accountability, which was developed in 2019. Unfortunately, because of one reason or the other, implementation is yet to be seen. And that is why there is now that is coming from the grassroots level, from communities against the county, because communities want to be involved. A lot of these communities from Turkana, for instance, they will tell you when you're there, they actually refer to Kitale going down as Kenya. They feel like they're not part of the country. And Turkana County is one of the counties that has the highest poverty rates. So this is a black gold that has been discovered on their land. And all they're asking for is to have a fair share of whatever is owed to them. A lot of the communities there, yet again, the elderly, are still waiting to get something. Some of those people will not have to wait we get to a production, for them to get something. If the revenue streams that have already come in, what the communities are saying is that let us have this money now. We have already established committees, the frameworks, the community land management committees, and now what is happening through civil society organizations that are working in Turkana is to empower these communities to be able to negotiate with investors at that particular level. So at national level, there's going to what is going to come to the Kenya as a country.
No.
But at grassroots level, there's what is supposed to come to the communities. And that's why, I mean, we're looking at 2019, we had the formulation of the Sovereign Wealth Fund Bill because it was aimed to get every Kenyan to enjoy the benefits from it.
Thank you, Muturi. I mean, I'll be coming back to you with more on how then do we empower these communities to give them a voice and to give them, you know, more reasoning and empower them to handle such complex issues. If you're just joining us, we're live from our national headquarters here in Nairobi. This is Biz Check, and of course we are live on your screen, which would be my left. You can see traditional dancers. They're gearing up for a major event that is expected to take place here. Eldoret is expected to be elevated from a municipal town. Yeah, it is going to become Kenya's 5th city. Remember, Nakuru was the 4th city. It was elevated by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and now Eldoret is joining this rank to become a city. You know, Nairobi is the eminent, and of course Mombasa comes second, Kisumu third, and Nakuru was 4th. And today, Eldoret is going to join this list. President William Ruto is already in Eldoret. He's going to preside over this event. And so at any given moment, we shall be going there live just to witness this historic event. Eldoret establishment in Kenya, and I mean, it was part of the colonial empire because of its rich rangeland and of course a favorable climate which was conducive for agricultural production, and so it has grown to become a major economic player in economic structures. And of course it is also one of the biggest producers of grains in this country, bearing in mind that it is in the Uasin Gishu County. And so we'll be watching keenly to see what becomes of Eldoret going forward. So let's listen.
Mayana women dancers. Asante. Basi Mheshimiwa Rais tunamtarajia hapa wakati wowote, na atakapofika kwanza atazuru vibanda vya maonyesho almaarufu exhibition tents, na kita moja kwa moja hadi kwenye jukwaa lake ambapo tutaanza na wimbo wa taifa na wimbo wa Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki. Kutoka pale program rasmi itaweza kuendelea vizuri. Kukukumbusha tu ni kwamba kwa vile ni siku ya furaha, tunaomba tuchangamke na tujiandae kumkaribisha Mheshimiwa Rais na viongozi wengine watakapofika. Salimia mwenzako, mwambie leo ni leo. Inakuwa city. Mwambie kwa lugha ya nyumbani, Eldoret inakuwa city. City ni nini kwa lugha ya nyumbani? City ni nini? City. Sana. Asante. Na pia nichukue nafasi hii kumkaribisha msanii ambaye anaitwa Komora Lady ajiandae, lakini kabla hajaja ni mwalike tena Sergeant Baye Mwana Misango atambue viongozi waliofika, huku nikiwatambua pia watumishi wa Mungu wote walio mahali hapa, wahubiri, maimam, reverends, bishop, Simameni tuwashangilie kidogo watumishi wa Mungu.
So that is exactly what is happening at the in Eldoret, actually, which is expected to be elevated into a city this afternoon by President William Ruto. The last time that this kind of event happened was on the 1st of December 2021, when Nakuru was conferred by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And so today, Eldoret is joining the ranks of cities in Kenya. Our report us to analyze and get more understanding and more perspectives as to what makes Eldoret a city and what makes it tick, from agriculture to hospitality industry, plus more. So how do we, or what are the considerations before a town is elevated into a city? All those details we'll be getting from our reporters and of course from our analysis going forward. But we are back in the studio. Our conversation this morning, we've been looking at Kenya's oil and gas industry. I mean, we have told you that the history of oil exploration in Kenya, it has been long and tedious. It started way back in 1950s. That was during the colonial government. And until 2012, that's when Kenya announced to the world that we have discovered huge hydrocarbon deposits which can produce commercially viable oil. And not until 2018, that's when Uhuru Kenyatta flagged off the first consignment of oil from Kenya on a pilot basis, what was called the Early Oil Pilot Project. And out of these, we managed to get about 1.5 billion shillings. And we became the first country in East Africa to taste the petrodollar. What has happened so far? That is the questions that we're asking ourselves here. We are in the company of the coordinator, national coordinator of Kenya Oil and Gas Working Group. And we're also in the company of Gertrude Kibare. She's an environmental law and policy advocate. And we're also looking at the issues of policies. What policies do we need to put in place to ensure that we get it right and we don't fall into what we call the oil curse, that has befallen many countries, around the world. You know them. And so that's the kind of conversation that we're having here. You're talking about empowering communities, so that they can be able to make critical decisions when it comes to issues of oil and gas. So who should empower these communities, and what is the process of empowering them, and how do you pick who is to be empowered and who vets the kind of shared with these communities?
Okay. Thank you, Kimani. I think when we talk about empowerment of our community, this is actually broad-based. It starts from the national government and then goes down to the county government. Mm-hmm. After the county government, then we have to look at the community-based organizations and also other non-state actors who are actually playing a critical role in that area, and also even to the investor himself that comes to the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the national government, we have functions of the national government, for example, education. Education in itself, looking at the extractive sector being a technical area, mm-hmm. then the national government, in collaboration with the county government and other stakeholders, can be able to actually tailor-make courses in their TVET institutions and other institutions in Turkana, to be able to impart knowledge to this young generation in Turkana, mm-hmm. to be able to understand the sector, the oil and gas sector, young enough, and also be able to now prepare manpower for future of the project, so that it will reach a time that we will be independent of expatriates and other people who come to Turkana, do the work that we can do it if only the community is able to be educated, trained, and also being enough advocacy. If you look at issues to do with, for example, gender mainstreaming, if you look at Turkana, historically Turkana, the way it is as a pastoral community, and the culture and the way of life of the people in Turkana, we advocate for equality, especially when it comes to women in the extractive sector. They play a very critical role in the sector, and there is need for the county government to come up with a gender mainstreaming policy such that once an investor comes to the ground, then that they must adhere to. In terms of gender mainstreaming, it will come in terms of employment of these young women, and also training and advocacy, coming up with entrepreneurial programs to ensure that even if they are employed in let me say doing manual jobs, not in the company, but they are able, from the money they get there, they are able to come up with the entrepreneurial programs, ensure that they can invest this money and benefit them as a community.
Very well.
Yes.
Muturi, you know, we also know that there has been a challenge, you know, trying to get investors to pump their resources. Project Oil Kenya, but we have heard from Talo Oil that they are now ready and willing to continue with this project after the financial setback that they have undergone in the last 2-3 years. And so before I let you go, I want to hear from you, what is going to be this industry in the next 2 to 3 years, and when do you expect us to have the big break in this industry?
Yeah, thank you. I think first and foremost, we need to understand the global dynamics. Fossil fuel development is facing a lot of from whatever sector quarters, simply because there is the global shift. We have countries, including Kenya, who are signatories to the Paris Agreement. So a lot of focus is going towards efforts for climate change adaptation and mitigation. And so one that actually then places a lot of with regards to the sector, number one. But if you look at the revenue angle of things, the oil and gas sector, the upstream petroleum sector is one that generates a lot of revenues for countries. So see how that balance can work. Prior to the enactment of the Petroleum Act, one of the big scheme was gas flaring in the course of petroleum and so through the act itself that was able to be curtailed unless for emergency situations. And so it means that again with advancements in technology, more is actually considering that we have a big, very big players in the Middle East and such. So I think also now looking at the national level and what is happening at the ground, more and more communities are getting aware. We've seen communities, for instance, from Lamu who've actually come up to stand and agitate for their rights. They've gotten 1.7 billion from the compensation of the Lamu port. So a lot of communities are now understanding their rights as rights holders and are able to hold decision bearers to account.
Very good.
Yes.
Muturi and finding time to be with us this morning, and of course sharing with us your insights. This is an evolving conversation, and you can be guaranteed that we shall get in touch with you and bring you here to discuss more.
Absolutely.
Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I can tell you this for free. You know, I was in Eldoret, in Turkana County, to be specific, the Lodwar town, and I can tell you this. There are turn around in this county. You know, there are new roads, there are street lights, there are new hotels, there are businesses booming there. And you can see clearly that in the last 10 years, you know, when you compare Lodwar town 10 years ago, this complete change in terms of, you know, even the appearance of the town. It was, back then it was a rusty, dusty town, because I've been there. And when I went there, almost 10 years later, I can tell you that I saw a different Turkana. And partly because of the investment that has been made after Kenya discovered this oil. Is it enough? Absolutely no. We need to do more. Biz Check, we are through with the first hour. We are coming back with the next hour. We are looking at science and innovation. Kenya is a leader in this industry in Africa, but we can do more. What do we need to do? That conversation is coming up here. Stay right now.
Kappabashi is a district in downtown Tokyo under the gaze of the towering Sky Tree. Famous for its many stores selling kitchen and cooking utensils. An 800-meter stretch of this road contains about 170 specialist stores. Dedicated cooks, whether professional or anything they need here. The most popular purchase is the Japanese kitchen knife, or hocho.
2 sentokus, which is the traditional knife in Japan, and the knives especially, I know that the craftsmanship is quite high.
This store has been in business for 100 years. It has an eye-catching display of knives, all forged by artisans using traditional techniques. Prized by Japanese chefs for precisely slicing and carving sashimi and vegetable dishes. This store has always taken great pride in the superior sharpness of its blades. These hocho cut so well because they have such extremely thin edges. To achieve this, the shop's own artisans sharpen each blade with extreme care. A good knife is one that cuts cleanly, leaving an absolute minimum of irregularity on the surface of the food. This and the best taste. These shops sell everything the discerning chef needs. For example, to make the multi-layered Japanese omelette known as tamagoyaki. You'll need a specially shaped frying pan made from copper. We use heat so well. This lets us quickly cook each layer of egg and roll it up without losing any moistness. That's what makes these omelettes so fluffy. You'll also need a dedicated item to make sushi rolls. Keen chefs use a bamboo rolling mat. The bamboo slats makes it easy to shape a perfect roll. A mat is essential when making thick futomaki sushi rolls. This is a tawashi, a traditional style of scrubbing brush. It's made from plant fiber. The flexible fibers thoroughly clean away even. With a tawashi, you don't need detergent, just water is fine. They'll clean vegetables without scraping or bruising, preserving all the flavor. Making children's meals can be a burden for busy parents, especially if both are working. New kitchen gadgets are now making their lives easier. Knife manufacturer is leveraging its blade-making expertise to develop new kitchen products.
We design for those who want to make meals quickly, but who are also keen on cooking skillfully. This product makes slicing salad easier. And here's a better vegetable peeler. They designed this small cutter for delicate carving. Now it's easy to get creative and add decorative touches to box lunches. What we try to do is develop products to make cooking fun instead of a chore. If they can enjoy it, we hope people will be willing to put in a little extra time and make more interesting meals. The same ideal led them to also develop cooking utensils specially for children. Designed miniature knives cut just as sharply as their adult versions. Now children can take the same joy in cooking as their parents. Good kitchen utensils not only make cooking fun, they're an essential support for the nation's food culture.
Very good, welcome back. You're watching us from our national headquarters here in Nairobi. This is Biz Check. We continue with our second hour. And just to update you, today we are not going to have Kurunzi because what's happening in... Remember, we started Biz Check late. So what you're seeing are just traditional dances, you know, dancing to their traditional tunes. And of course, they are awaiting the arrival of President William Ruto, who is going to confer to a city status to Eldoret municipal town. From today is going to be elevated city status, joining the list of four other cities: Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nakuru. And the most interesting thing about all these now 5 cities is that it's only one city that doesn't have an international airport, and that is Nakuru. Yeah. International airport, Kisumu International Airport, more international airports in Mombasa, and then we have Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi. And so, what are the considerations before a town is elevated into a city status? We'll be looking at all that, and of course, this is what exactly is happening here. My city has been long and tedious for Eldoret town. I mean, this claim has started way back when President Daniel Arap Moi was still the president of the Republic of Kenya. And I'm talking about this was 1996. Yes, that's when the idea was floated for the first